There were reports about, asking for a trade. Where are things with that, and how do you separate, the business side from going out there and playing?
I asked, they said no, and that's kind of that's where that stopped. But I mean, I'm just keep doing my job until something shake out either way. Honestly, I don't know which way it's gonna go, but I'll be ready for whatever.
Are you pretty confident that something will work out here?
I wouldn't say I'm pretty confident. Like I said, I really don't know where it's gonna go, but I know, like I said, I'm ready. I'm ready to go if you want me to go. I'm ready to play if you need me to play. So.
Are you happy here?
Am I happy? It's a job, you know what I mean? At the end of the day, like I'm happy to be doing my job with my boys, but I could be happy anywhere.
So that was Jakobi Meyers. And then, of course, came this. Ian Rappaport, the first to say, come back no more. Amari Cooper has informed the Raiders that he no longer has the desire to play and intends to retire. Cooper has signed at the end of camp and a hopeful reunion with the team that drafted him. Now he is headed home from Las Vegas. So a 10-day tenure for Amari Cooper with the Las Vegas Raiders. And to talk more about that, and of course the season opener here in Foxborough, happy to welcome in the Athletics. Tashan Reed joining us, covers the Raiders and of course the National Football League. And you can also hear him on the Just Win podcast. All right, Tashan, when it comes to that wide receiver room in Vegas, there's certainly a lot to talk about these days. What did you make of, I guess, Amari's retirement when it came?
Yeah, I mean, it was pretty surprising. They signed him just a week ago, and he went unsigned for most of the year, and so he hadn't participated in OTAs and training camp, and so it was going to take him some time to get back up to speed and get back into playing shape. But I think he realized after practicing for the past week that he just didn't have it in him anymore. That desire that you need to get back in shape, to learn the system, to go out there and, take that punishment to your body that you have to, play in a game as physical as football. And football is one of those sports where unless you're all in, you're going to get hurt or you're just not going to be yourself. And I think he's a guy that, he's a former multi-time Pro Bowler. He's a prideful guy, high draft pick. He's used to playing and looking a certain way. And I think he just didn't feel like he had it in him anymore. And so he ultimately decided to walk away. And it did put the Raiders in a precarious position because they really did need that extra depth that they got by signing him. This is a really thin receiver room, and that also with Jakobi Meyers, that gives him a lot of leverage with his contract negotiations because outside of him, they don't really have anybody else in that room that's proven. And Amari Cooper was one guy you could say that about, and now he's gone. And so, again, it swings back to Jakobi Meyers and, kind of helps him build his case to try to get an extension.
You mentioned Jakobi Meyers, and he's a player who we heard opening this segment just saying he could be happy anywhere, but it is a job. But what do the Raiders do in order to have a wide receiver room that is hungry to be there?
Yeah, Jakobi, that's just kind of his speed. Like he's like that about anything, kind of that it is what it is mentality. And, he felt like his play last year, which was his best season in his career, justified an extension. And, what he's making now, $10.5 million, it's, down in the 30s in terms of average annual value amongst receivers. And he's a better player than that. And he knows that. And that market has, gone up a lot this year. But it is a business at the end of the day. And the Raiders did draft Jack Besh, rookie receiver, in the second round this year, who has a pretty similar skill set to Meyers. And you kind of see what the Patriots would do a lot of times. You get a guy's replacement before you lose the guy. And it feels like that's kind of what the Raiders did. And so you understand both perspectives. But Meyers, he's not a guy that's gonna, fake an injury or not give full effort. Like I know that, the Raiders fans are probably a little bit scorned from last year with Devontae Adams, when he requested his trade. He was out with a hamstring injury and didn't play, and then he got traded to the New York Jets and suddenly he was out there again, and so Jakobi isn't going to go that route. He's going to still be out there, still practicing, still giving it his, still playing on Sundays. And he said that the main reason why he's doing that instead of holding out is just loyalty to his teammates. He's been here for a few years. He's close with a lot of the guys in the locker room. He's one of the more respected players in the locker room. And so he's going to give full effort. He's not going to be happy. Like I think you can tell by that video and his comments that he's definitely not happy, but that's not going to affect his performance on game days.
Do you think there's any chance that the Raiders will look to do some type of extension with him in season, or is this something that's just going to be tabled at this point?
I would be pretty surprised, just because, as I mentioned earlier, like when you draft somebody like Besh, who basically has the same skill set as Jakobi Meyers, it doesn't really make sense. It'd be one thing if Besh was a 4th-round pick, 5th-round pick, but a 2nd-round pick, you expect that guy to be a starter, and you expect him to be a starter soon. And if that's the case, it just doesn't really make sense to have him and Jakobi Meyers around. And so I would be pretty surprised if they extend Myers at this point, just because it doesn't seem to add up with their moves in the offseason.
Another rookie, Dante Thornton, also going to need to step up for this team. What should we know about him as a player?
Yeah, he was sort of just a ball of traits coming into the league. I mean, his career high for catches in a single season in college was like 20 something, so he didn't have much volume, but he really stood out to them in the process because of how unique his skill set is. I mean, he's almost 6'5", about 210, ran a 4.3 flat, and you don't really see too many guys that have those type of measurables. I believe the only guys in the history of the combine who had those same measurables are Randy Moss and Calvin Johnson. And I'm not saying he's going to be, that caliber of player, but you can see why the Raiders were intrigued by his skill set. And I think he hit the ground running a lot faster than people expected. As early as OTAs, he was pretty entrenched as a starter on the outside and locked in as that X receiver for them. And that's continued to be the case through training camp. And it looked like he's going to be the starter in week 1. He's a guy that obviously has a lot of deep threat ability, downfield, big plays, but he's also improved his short to intermediate route running and become a more complete receiver. He's not going to be the number one option in this offense by any means. You have Brock Bowers, you have Jacoby Myers, you have Ashton Genty, who would be involved both as a runner and in the pass game. So there'll be a lot of other targets that the Raiders can go to, but that should actually free up Dante because he'll get a lot of single coverage. And if you're leaving a guy with that type of speed and size and single coverage, chances are he's going to make some big plays. And so that's what they're hoping for him as a rookie. And he's kind of been a surprise because a lot of people looked to Jack Besh as a second-round pick. You would expect that would be the guy that would emerge as a starter, but it's actually been Thornton who stepped up as a 4th-round pick for him this year.
Yeah, I heard some people in fantasy circles mentioning his name as someone to pick up late in a draft. And if he's still there on your board, maybe go and grab him. He's someone who could make some noise. Let's look at this game this weekend, Tashan, because I don't know about you, but this one is really intriguing to me because you have 2 new head coaches, obviously some changes within, the 53 on both of these teams. Really in New England, Mike Vrabel's made a lot of changes. How do you see this one on Sunday?
Yeah, it's kind of the interesting and rare case of a double revenge game, right? Because you got offensive coordinator Josh McDaniels going against the team that fired him on Halloween, and then you have Pete Carroll, who got fired by the Patriots way back in the day, and then also
way back
lost that Super Bowl. Yeah, lost that Super Bowl when he was the head coach of the Seahawks. So there's a little bit of bad blood on both sides in this one, and that adds a little extra intrigue to it. But I do think these teams are in similar places. Like, obviously, they had pretty rough seasons last year, made a coaching change, made a lot of changes to the roster. They have really young teams and sort of these teams that are in this transitional period and trying to figure out who they are. I think they're still trying to discover themselves. And so it's kind of hard to, set expectations for this game on Sunday, but I do think they're pretty evenly matched. And I think it would be a close one that goes down to the wire. And ultimately it's going to come down to who executes better in those late game moments and which coach has the upper hand. And I think these coaches are pretty evenly matched too. I mean, Pete Carroll, Mike Vrabel, 2 of the best in the business. And so I'm expecting a tight one. And it should be a pretty exciting one as well.
2 teams that are in very similar situations coming off of last year with new head coaches that have tenured in the NFL. But Mike Vrabel here in Boston has definitely made his stake. He's definitely made a statement and really had some key moments, getting a cut on his cheek from a moment at training camp and some joint practices, even getting into the fire. What moment for you has stuck out about Pete Carroll's just preseason so far with the Raiders?
So they were actually practicing indoors. It was kind of a similar moment. And they were sort of doing this tush-push drill, trying to figure out how to stop it. And literally as they snap the ball, Pete Carroll jumps into the push. He gets on top of the pile. And I don't think the players knew he was going to do that. He kind of got stuck. It took him a while to get out. So he has, even though he's a lot older than Mike Vrabel, he has a ton of energy. He's not afraid to get in there with the guys. But that sort of always compete mentality and that energy that he brings to the table is something that the players are really adopted to really quickly. Obviously, Pete Carroll has an excellent resume. He's most likely going to be in the Pro Football Hall of Fame one day. But, that's not enough to win over guys' respect at this level. These players have done things and accomplished things and been around legendary coaches in their own right. And so you have to be able to connect to them on a human level and relate to them. And that's something I think Pete Carroll has really managed to pull off on a really quick basis. He has guys that he's coached before, like Geno Smith, starting quarterback, but he's been able to ingratiate himself with new guys like Max Crosby as well. He didn't previously know. And so I think that element of it, really drilling in on that human connection piece and managing to pull it off in a really quick way to where he's, sort of galvanized the locker room, instilled his culture, and the guys are all in. It just comes down to, how good is a team, but I think that, they're set up to where if this isn't the best season or if they have to overcome some adversity, they aren't going to fall apart and turn on each other. Like, it'll still be tough to deal with, but I think this is a team that can stick together through those tough moments. And that's, as a coach, that's part of why you put so much effort towards, leaning into those interpersonal relationships.
Tashan, you wrote a piece for The Athletic that came out today, and you spoke to Pete Carroll for part of it. And one of the things that he talked about was that Tom Brady really changed his viewpoint of the Las Vegas Raiders, and his perspective on what it would be as a head coaching job, knowing that he wanted to coach in this league again after being out last season, but it was Brady that really made him look at Vegas differently. Tell us a little bit more about your piece, and we all know Brady real well here in New England, but what he now means to this Las Vegas Raiders franchise.
Yeah, there aren't many franchises that have been consistently dysfunctional as the Las Vegas Raiders. They haven't won a playoff game since I was 6 years old, I believe it is. And so, it's been a lot of head coaching changes, a lot of losing, not much to be happy about. And, that was the case in Al Davis's later years, but it's also been the case for Mark Davis's entire tenure as owner. And I mean, since they've been in, Las Vegas alone, they cycled through 4 different head coaches, 4 different GMs. And that only happens if a lot of bad stuff is happening. And so, I think Mark Davis kind of looked internally and realized this franchise is missing something, like not just a different head coach or GM, but we need somebody with a different level of football acumen that he frankly just doesn't have. Like, he's a fan of the team and he's really passionate about it. And he knows everything going on with the team, but he just doesn't have that football knowledge. And he really wanted to bring in somebody that had that. And, few people know football more than Tom Brady. And so, given his Fox role and things of that nature, they kind of had to get creative and figuring out how to bring him in. But him buying into that minority ownership stake of the team opened the door for him to essentially have this, hands-on involvement with the team where he's not a team employee, technically, and he doesn't have an official role in the front office, but he's almost like a senior advisor for the primary football decision makers. And so when it comes to deciding whether they're going to go trade for Geno Smith or prior to that, when they're deciding who they're going to hire as their head coach or GM or during training camp when they're trying to evaluate the roster, like he's somebody that's readily accessible, and whether that's over the phone or if he comes in town to Las Vegas and is on site for those meetings and to speak to the team and things of that nature. And so his hands have already been all over this franchise, even though it hasn't even been a full year since he bought into the team. And it's something that's going to continue and probably only continue to grow into the future, as the years go on. It's hard to say what the end goal is for Tom Brady. I'm sure that, he would love to be the controlling owner of a team one day, but that's something that we'll probably have to play out over the course of quite a few years from now.
On a scale of 1 to 10, sorry, AB, on a scale of 1 to 10, where would you put his involvement number if 10's the most?
10. He's very, very involved, really involved. He's not here every day. He doesn't live in Las Vegas, but he's talking to John Spytek, the GM, to Pete Carroll, to Alex Guerrero, essentially who's running their training staff now. He's talking to all of them on a daily basis. So he has his finger on the pulse with this franchise day in and day out.
Well, that's exactly what I was going to ask, because in your article, you really talked about how, hey, it might not actually be how it seems. His involvement, like you're saying, is a 10. And just for the Patriots fans that are going to watch this ahead of Sunday's game against the Raiders, how worried do you think they should be if that is a 10 with Tom Brady's involvement?
I don't know how worried they are. They might have some mixed feelings about it. I know the Raiders and the Patriots, like, it's been a while, but they do have some bad blood stemming from the Tuck Rule game. It's more about the Raiders fans, I think, towards the Patriots fans than the other way around. You know what I mean? So I don't know how much Patriots fans are worried about the Raiders, but I'm sure it is weird for them. Just like it was weird for them seeing him in the Bucs jersey and winning the Super Bowl. I'm sure it is strange seeing him like walk out of a tunnel in that white Raiders jacket. It probably just feels a little bit off. And, Brady won't be there. He'll be calling, as we mentioned earlier with his other job, he'll call on the Commanders-Giants game in D.C., so he won't be there on site, so maybe that'll lessen it a little bit. But it is kind of weird. They're going to be – his old team is going to be taking on his new team in a stadium where he has a statue outside. So it is a pretty strange
right? All the different pieces, like, talk about having your fingers on a lot of different things. There is an image right there that sums that up on Sunday when he is in a different state entirely. Alex Guerrero, of course, someone else who we're very familiar with here in New England. And he's now out there, and you've written about that as well. Like, what is his role now with the Raiders? We know Brady relied so heavily on him throughout the course of his career.
Yeah, no, Alex is a very polarizing figure out in New England, depending on who you talk to, Bill Belichick being one of them. But, he did essentially do the same thing he did with the Patriots down with the Bucks when they won that Super Bowl with Brady there. And, I kind of asked the same thing when I saw his title, wellness coordinator. Like, what does that mean? Like, I've never seen that title in the NFL team. It basically just gives him purview over the training staff. So, whether that's strength and conditioning, whether that's medical, whether that's mental health, he sort of has his hands in all those areas, and he's bringing essentially the TB12 method to the Raiders. It's something that Tom is very involved in as well, and talks to Alex every day about how they're going about their business. And, Alex, the focus for him is really on avoiding those soft tissue, non-contact injuries, the torn ACLs, the Achilles, those sort of season enders. It's just football, so you can't really avoid concussions or broken bones and things of that nature. But those types of injuries are what he's trying to avoid with the Raiders, and so far that's been the case. They have a couple players on injury reserve, Aiden O'Connell and safety Lyndon Johnson, but both of those are due to broken bones. And so at least so far this year, they haven't had those soft tissue injuries. Like, it's only been it hasn't even been a year yet, so it's too early to say Alex is figured it all out, and it's a non-issue moving forward. But they're off to a good start, and it's something that I think some fans are a little skeptical about because of how everything went down with the Patriots. But at least so far, it's been a non-issue for the Raiders.
All right, last but not least, Tashan, give us a score prediction. I know you're expecting this one to be a close one. How do you see it finishing off?
Yeah, so I'll stick with my prediction that I made on my podcast. I have the Raiders winning 24-20. I do think it's going to come down to the wire, but I like the Raiders' firepower on offense a little more with Geno Smith, new offensive coordinator Chip Kelly. We mentioned the receivers earlier, but also Ashton Genty and Brock Bowers. I think they have a lot of firepower on offense, and their offensive line is a little shaky. And so if the Patriots can get after Smith and affect him, that could flip things. But I also think the Patriots, we'll see on Christian Gonzalez if he ends up playing or not. I know he hasn't practiced this week. I don't think they made a final determination of if he's going to play, but I think that would be a big loss if he is out. And so I think I give the edge to the Raiders, even though they're going into hostile territory up there in New England.
I see it similarly. I think it's going to be a close one. We'll see how it all shakes out. AB and I will make some picks coming up still ahead here on Foxborough Rush. Tashan Reed, thanks so much for being with us. We appreciate your time.
Thank you for having me. Appreciate it.
Safe trip to New England. We'll be back with more Foxborough Rush right after this.